We are in Chapter 9, Part 2 of The Manipulated Mind by Denise Wynn. The next step in Evan's downfall, as Kennedy enumerates them, was bewilderment of a very powerful kind. It is astonishing, says Kennedy at this stage, how closely the events that accidentally happened to Evans follow the communist pattern of interrogation. The POWs reached a stage where they had to confess, if only for their own relief. But the communists knew that the confession itself would not for long be convincing to the individual who made it. Therefore, they would reject it. The POW who believed he had finally offered what was wanted of him was, as a result, completely bewildered and thrown into confusion anew. It would become all the more urgent for him to have his confession accepted. Therefore, he would invest more of himself in it, willing it unwittingly to be real. In Evans' case, he had made a confession. He had buried his wife in a drain. The police rejected it. They did not know they had reason to reject it, as he genuinely thought himself that his wife's body would be found in the drain. Only later was he hit with the accusation that, far from pushing his already dead wife down the drain, he had strangled both her and Geraldine and left both bodies in the wash house. It was the first he knew of Geraldine's death. He had believed her alive in West London. That he suffered increasing depression, fatigue, and despair was self-evident. He also wanted to talk, and therefore was dependent on his interrogators. The communists deliberately altered their attitude from hostility one moment to friendliness to the next in order to confuse the prisoner. For Evans, such confusion also occurred because he had two police examiners, one whom he liked and the other who frightened him. His increasing suggestibility and his need to confess in order to achieve relief led Evans to mistake the cause of the relief he felt after confession. He didn't realize that he had acted to dissipate his emotions. He presumed he had unburdened himself of his crime. He even said, "It's a great relief to get it off my chest. I feel better already." That relief didn't last. In prison, the day after the hearing in the magistrate's court, he was able to tell his mother that he hadn't killed his wife and daughter. Christie had done it. Also working against Evan in his interrogation was a genuine belief of the examining officers that Evans was indeed guilty. Indeed, says Kennedy, it was the very intensity of their beliefs that blinded them to things they might otherwise have seen. Do not let us forget that on the very morning of the investigation, Jennings, one of the officers, had seen with his own eyes the pathetic little bundle that was Geraldine lying behind the wash house door. One of the things they might otherwise have seen was the true nature of a piece of evidence which proved beyond doubt that Evans could not have put the bodies in the wash house on the day he confessed to putting them there. Over the period of time in question, building work was carried out at 10 Rillington Place. The evidence of the building works manager, the plasterer, and the plasterer's mate, who had gone in and out of the wash house, showed that nobody could have been there on the date it was supposedly deposited, even before Evans' departure to Wales. The wood that was found covering them had not even been given to Christie until a week later. The police officers were so convinced of Evans' guilt that at no point did their minds turn to wondering about Christie's role in all of this. Instead, they called in the builders and interrogated them all separately. The builders were obliged to wait for hours before they were seen, and were then grilled for lengthy periods. The outcome was that the men eventually conceded that they must have been mistaken about the dates. A time-sheet that showed quite clearly the truth of the first statements, and which had been given to the police, was never seen again. It is the only time sheet missing from the firm's records over the relevant 5-year period. In Mental Seduction and Menticide, Merleau makes the point that those charming characters who are easily able to influence others are often extremely susceptible to suggestion themselves. Sargent makes the same point for a different reason when he explains how confessions can come to be believed by both suspect and accuser. This is because the examiner first suggests to the prisoner that he is guilty of a crime and tries to convince him, if he is not already convinced, that this is so. Even if the prisoner is innocent, the long tension to which he has been subjected may well have already frightened him into suggestibility, and if he is an unstable type, he may then accept the examiner's view of his guilt. If the examination is pressed, he may even begin, as it were, to play back an old record, confessing to crimes suggested by the police in earlier cross-examinations. The police, forgetting that the incidents were originally their own guesswork, are deceived. The prisoner has now spontaneously confessed what they have been suspecting all along. It is not usually realized that fatigue and anxiety induce suggestibility in the examiner as well as the prisoner. The task of eliciting confessions is a very difficult and trying one, and that they can delude each other into a belief in the genuineness of the confessed crime. Merleau explains such a phenomena by the fact that the interrogation process induces a hypnotic state in the suspect. The suspect is able to produce bits and pieces of the confession wanted from him because the passive memory often remembers facts learned under hypnosis better than those learned in a state of alert consciousness. Kennedy says that in such a way, Evans certainly succeeded in brainwashing his examiners. What Jennings and Black, the police officers, gave to him, he gave back to them, and not only to them, but to others in positions of even greater authority. Zimbardo points out that the American police have used psychology to refine their interrogation techniques, not of course to elicit false confessions, but in the belief that such tactics will uncover true ones from otherwise intransigent subjects. He lists the categories these tactics fall into. The environment is manipulated so that it denies the psychological support offered by any element of the familiarity. Ideally, there should be no ashtrays nor even a telephone. The suspect's perception of the crime is manipulated. He may be led to believe it isn't very serious. The relationship between the interrogator and the suspect is manipulated. The interrogator may stand over the suspect or demonstrate disquieting composure in the face of the suspect's unease. And I'll stop it right there, and we'll pick up with part 2 of chapter 9 from the Manipulated Mind in the next video.